Honorable mentions and runner ups, also rans and things that didn't make the list but maybe should have. It's a bonus episode. Welcome back to the 50/50 Project, where every week I talk through an item on a list made up of one thing I've learned for each year I've lived. We are almost at the very end of this list. And next week I'll finish up the last category and actually the whole darn project with thing number 50. But before I do that, this week I want to run through a few of the ideas that didn't quite make it into that list. This project started with a huge, sprawling list of things I have learned. And then I whittled them down to fit the 50/50 framework, cutting out things that seemed too minor or too specific or were maybe kind of repetitive of other stronger things for the list. And slowly but surely, I got it down to exactly 50 things. And so it happened that the structure of the program fell sort of organically into 10 categories of about 5 things each. I think there are 2 categories with 4 items and 2 with 6, but it was pretty well balanced overall otherwise. But after all the organizing and structuring, there were a few things on the cutting room floor that I kind of regretted losing. And so today I'm just going to blow through a quick review of the 49 things we've already talked about and add an honorable mention for each of the 10 categories, just so I can put those ideas to good use before I wrap up this podcast. Let's start out with the making category. So, what already made the list in terms of making includes stuff like getting good at being bad at stuff, asking for feedback from the right kinds of people, doing instead of stewing, looking for confirmation instead of competition, cringing minimally, and kicking perfection to the curb. Now, the runner up for this category is just something I'm calling F monetizing. I cannot tell you how many times people have asked me if I have been able to monetize this tiny little restricted audience podcast. We live in a world where if you can't make money off of it, or if you can't use it to get a promotion or get a raise or get some other kind of material benefit out of it, it's not worth doing in a lot of people's estimation. And I think that's a huge stumbling block for our happiness. I think this idea that something should bring you something more tangible than simple joy itself is pretty pervasive in our culture and pretty toxic. So if you want to do something, and if you think that doing itself will enrich or enliven or brighten your life, I think that's enough of a payoff. So just do it. Okay, then. Let's revisit the stuff category real quick. The stuff category was interesting because a couple of the episodes were really about my flirting with minimalism. I talked about acquiring mindfully instead of accumulating sort of on autopilot, and also about how I've learned to let go of gifts that either don't work for me or don't serve me anymore. And that includes things that I've inherited. Like I learned that I don't have to carry around a pink ceramic dog statuette for 35 years just to prove that I dearly loved the aunt who left it to me. But on the other side of the coin, I also talked about where I've learned to spend out a little bit, like throwing money at some of my problems, like hiring somebody to do something that's too big or too complicated for me, or spending a little bit more to get big returns from little investments, like the exact tea I want or the exact lip balm that my heart desires. And the bonus item for the stuff category is short circuit splurges. This could also be called the card of doom, I suppose. This is a tactic that I use to short circuit impulse buys and scratch the itch to browse without actually spending any real money. I will go to a favorite website, load up a cart, and just leave it there to rot. The rule is if I go back in 2 or 3 days and I still want whatever it was that I was longing for, I can consider actually buying it. But at least half of the time, I find that on a revisit, I can live without whatever it is. I think it's been really useful for me to do this over the last few years. Okay, so let's get back to work. So I think about work a lot. Work is a big part of my life. So it's not surprising that I talked about it quite a bit over the course of this podcast. I mentioned the importance of building your fences and then doing everything that you say you're going to do within those confines. I reflected on what I've learned about bullshitters and working with my own tendencies instead of against them, and how to best use my mornings, and the huge importance of really being off when I take time off so that I can be on when I'm on. The honorable mention for the work category is don't be an imposter. And what I really mean by this is try not to allow yourself to fall victim to the imposter syndrome thing, which is so easy to do. Some of the most qualified, most experienced, most talented people I have ever worked with or ever known, really, have struggled with feelings that they aren't smart enough or prepared enough or skilled enough. And I think we all struggle with this at some point. I know I have. The thing I most wish about my own career is probably that I'd stopped doubting myself a lot sooner. So work hard, get your credentials together, learn as you go, and internalize those lessons. Then get out of your own way. Trust yourself and what you know, and kick imposter syndrome to the curb. Alrighty then, on to the happiness category, which is maybe the most important one of all. One of the most important things that I think I've learned about myself over all of these years is that happiness for me, it's not just a condition that sort of happens, it's a practice that I have to lean into and give effort to. And so I talked about some of the ways that I try to help myself get there in this podcast series. Staying open to awe and wonder as it unfolds around us. Trying to make friends with the season that I'm in instead of just waiting for the time of the year that I like the best. Trying to battle FOMO and realizing that if I can't commit to any of my options because I'm afraid of missing out, it might mean that I don't have any options at all left. And I've talked a little bit about some of the worksheets and activities and lists that I make for myself just to keep bringing me back home to what makes me happy and what keeps me in touch with the best parts of my life. And a lot of that advice probably wasn't for everybody, but it's been helpful to me. I think what I would add to the happiness category in terms of a bonus item is laugh at everything. Let yourself laugh if you want to at absolutely anything, absolutely anywhere that you can find even the merest pinprick of humor or irony or absurdity or insanity. My sense of humor, which is sometimes a gallows humor, sometimes a dark humor, has saved me in some of my worst moments and my saddest seasons in ways that I don't think really any other coping mechanism could have served. And I think that's true for a lot of us. So if you feel yourself finding the dark humor in something, let yourself laugh at everything and don't apologize for it. Okay, on to the communications category, which emerged as a particularly important subtopic in my listing. And I think that's because that's where my education and my profession comes in. A couple of the items in this subcategory were about how and when I've learned to say the things that are important, the kind things, the laudatory things, the thank yous, the tributes. And I spoke in this podcast about writing more odes than elegies in terms of saying it before it's too late to say it to somebody's face, right? And keeping what I do say in terms of praise or kindness true and capable of brooking complexity in relationships and connections. I also talked a little bit about cognitive process and the importance of listening to understand, not to respond, so that you're actually hearing what the person has to say instead of your own thoughts in reaction to it. And also how valuable it is to really take what we're thinking in terms of our opinions and say it in our own words so that we can process what we actually think and feel and why. And I think most of all, to respect the power of our language and our words and how we can build each other up with it or how we can hurt each other. The bonus item in the communications category is find a safe space to speak shame. I think shame is an incredibly powerful and crippling feeling. And it's the secrecy that we gird around our shame that really gives it power, making us feel different or isolated or somehow ruined. If we can find somebody who can hear whatever we're most ashamed of, and I don't just mean anybody, because not everybody deserves or merits this level of confidence. It has to really be somebody in your corner that you can trust with your life. But if you are lucky enough to find that person and put your shame into words, it can be fucking miraculous. That goes back to the power of language. In most cases, it breaks its power and connects us back to perspective and community in a way that little else can. So build relationships of deep trust if you're blessed to be able to do that, and find ways to speak your shame instead of letting it overcome you in silence. Okay, then, moving on to the spirituality category. So, this category was a little bit all over the place, which to me is in keeping with my view of spirituality, which is mysterious, confusing, and all encompassing, and that it touches every area of life. I spoke a little bit about how I've learned to handle my faith, as in get my hands around it, take it down off the shelf, and really explore my convictions and my beliefs. I talked about the spiritual imperative of being myself and honoring what my spirit calls me to, um, facing darkness, working gratitude muscles, and sitting with injustice and uncertainty. The honorable mention item for the spirituality category is be ethical always, be kind as often as possible, and be nice only very rarely. My ethics are non negotiable baselines that I really try to carry into every endeavor. I aspire to be kind whenever I can, and I never regret it when I am. But being nice, and I'm defining nice as a performative, superficial kind of nice that belies my own feelings to accommodate others for anything other than the very best of reasons. That kind of nice, honestly, I could give two shits about. So ethical always, kind often, nice only rarely. All right, moving on to the conflict category, which seems like a weird category at first glance, but part of my work is actually in consensus building and conflict resolution, so I guess that explains it, maybe. Over the course of this year, I talked a little bit about how to fight fair and how to temper your conflicts with the realization that we're all going to be dead soon and you may not be able to fix tomorrow what you've broken today. Um, I discussed how I wish I had left space for grace in certain circumstances, meaning that I wish I hadn't always assumed the absolute worst about the other person. And there were a couple of episodes toward the end that are more about public rhetoric and how, in my view, internet hot takes and yucking someone's yum, as the kids say, on internet comment forums is making life worse than it needs to be. And it's also making it harder for us to be curious about each other instead of angry with people that we might disagree with on certain issues. The runner up, the bonus item for the conflict category, really spins out of my work, and it's be as transparent as possible as soon as possible. And I especially mean with bad news. People or organizations who hide ugly truths, usually to protect themselves or just to postpone their own discomfort, they only compound the pain and the disruption that will come along with this news. So I firmly believe that nothing good comes of deception on top of disappointment. Be as transparent as possible as soon as possible. Okay, we're getting there as we check into the body category, which I pointed out a couple times as probably the most challenging category for me personally. It's where I struggle most to live by the things that I've learned over the years. And I talked a lot about what I fail to do, even though I know it's important. I talked about struggling with habits of addition, like going to sleep earlier, and habits of subtraction, like eating less sugar. But I also talked about how important I think it is to become more attuned to my body by firing up all five senses and really drinking in all the world has to offer in terms of sensory experience. And also how to listen to myself when my body's telling me things about the room being too cold or a scratchy tag in the collar of my shirt that's driving me crazy, and how I can eliminate that instead of just dealing with it all day. And also how, when I cue into my emotions and the register in my body, it means that I can confront them sooner and deal with them more effectively. The bonus item for the body category is be your own best bodyguard whenever you can. And this isn't as well thought out as it probably needs to be, but I mostly mean psychologically here. I'm not talking about physical threats because we all just do the best that we can with those if we're unlucky enough to face them. I'm saying here, I guess, that your body is yours. And in most cases, it's nobody else's business. And opinions and comments and suggestions and judgments about it that come from others, especially those that are intended to wound, but also those that creep in under the guise of concern, I think those can kind of go into the circular file. Most of us are doing the best we can to take care of ourselves physically and mentally. And I think in most cases, it's okay to close the doors on those who would cut you down or tear you up. Okay, on to what I know about love. What I know about love is that you have to really be present for it. You have to be willing to do the work of addressing your grievances or genuinely letting them go. And I think love can come in a lot of forms that go beyond the traditional sort of romantic conception that is front and center in our society of love. And that includes loving yourself enough to turn off the news or get extra rest or protect yourself from the hectic world that we live in. And it also means taking a moment to really marvel at the profound miracle of friendship. When people who owe you nothing will give you everything that they can give you in terms of love and support and kindness and affection. And keeping with the theme of love and its value in all of its forms, the bonus is love across species. And pets aren't for everybody. Some people just don't feel it, but for a lot of us, they bring tremendous joy and fulfillment to life. And they leave terrible wounds when they go. So if pets aren't your thing, that's fine, but don't minimize the joy they bring to others or the grief they leave in their wake. And speaking of which, we end with the lost category, which is the final category that was developed in the podcast and the topic of the last 5 episodes. So, this category has been pretty cathartic for me, and I've taken a lot of comfort in exploring some of these themes, um, like the fact that in the best of circumstances, it's the best of what we leave behind that's remembered. That joy is still a birthright, even through tremendous loss and sadness, and that grief does bring us gifts of insights and understanding, even though those are gifts that we never wanted and we would happily give back. I've also thought a lot about how both things can be true in the episode I did about Ted Lasso and his mother's relationship, and how it's very comforting to get to a place in life where I can look back and say, okay, the people around me in these moments of profound disruption and loss did the absolute best that they could and were heroic and noble in their efforts. But it's also true that I didn't get everything I needed in those moments. And to be able to hold both of those things in concert without either making a villain of someone who wasn't or minimizing my own pain, which was actually quite great, that's been a great learning experience for me over time. And the final episode will be called Every Bond is a Bond to Sorrow. It's Not as depressing as it sounds, although it's also not sunshine and rainbows. But I've always known that that would be where I ended up in this podcast because it truly is the lesson that's most profoundly shaped my life and who I am in the world. So that is coming up next week. I will go ahead though and throw in a bonus item in the lost category, and that is don't kill other people's cardinals. I'm referring here to this popular idea that cardinals come as messengers from beyond. I'll often see people in my social media feeds mention that they've seen a cardinal, or maybe they've noticed some completely different kind of little sign from the universe that suggests to them that a lost loved one is still out there reaching out to them. And you don't have to believe that, and I don't have to believe that. But we also don't have to add a comment that makes fun of them for believing it. I don't have to shit on little things that comfort other people. I can have my own ideas, and it doesn't compromise them one little bit to just shut up on Facebook or in a conversation in the grocery store and let them have their little sliver of comfort. I mean, the cardinal people ideally won't be imposing their interpretations on my cardinals, of course, but I think we should all just live and let live and be happy that we can find something that comforts us as we go. Okay, so that's the wrap up and the bonus items for each category. Next week is number 50, and I can't believe that this year long project is over so soon. I don't delude myself into thinking that I really brought anything groundbreaking to the small group of people who've listened this year, but I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm feeling the satisfaction of completing a big, long project that has no external reason for being. It's just something I wanted to make, so I did. And that's a really great feeling. And I hope others will do things they want to do just for themselves, just for the process of making. So thanks for spending some time with me today and for spending time with me over the last year. And I'll be back next week with thing number 50.